appetite for mergers and acquisitions in boardrooms across the globe has sharpened over the past several months, with strategic players attempting to grow cross-border. As the globalisation trend of M&A approaches its third decade, with of course a blip in the road during the financial crisis, firms in a number of major industries have gathered instinct for investing externally. But this type of growth famously can go wrong. Michael McCaw, Editor-in-Chief of World Finance, joins me now. Well, Michael, how important is good project management in large-scale M&A?
If you look at the number of potential mergers and acquisitions that have just fallen by the wayside over the years, it's just absolutely clinical to get things in place, have somebody overseeing the whole thing, and moving forward to keep an eye on everything from cultural differences to how the beans are counted. Everything has to go to an absolute T. A lot of people think it's a huge deal, a lot of money changing hand, we can afford to lose a bit of cash here or there. It tends to end up. The other problem is it tends to drag on time-wise, and as time drags on, problems multiply. So keeping an eye on the finer detail, absolutely imperative.
So what markets are seeing a lot of M&A activity at the moment?
Everywhere. Oil and gas, technology, telecoms, sports, strangely enough, financial services. This is a global trend, like you say earlier. This is the era of globalization. You've got companies in one corner of the earth buying companies in the other corner of the earth, and they're not always in the same industry, which can make things a little bit difficult for themselves.
Well, let's focus on the oil and gas sector now. Why are companies looking towards external growth?
Firstly, and I think with growing prominence, is financially. So to invest in a company, strip away its assets, maybe invest in it here and there, and then flog it on. The second reason for it, of course, is strategic. For the oil and gas markets, this is something that's happening a lot more prominently. This is because there's quite a broad and quite a clear supply chain there. From a project manager's perspective, actually, it's a dream, because there's very, very easily segmented portions of the supply chain, and both upstream and downstream, there are different slots. So a company will go, okay, I'll look downstream or I'll look upstream, and buy towards my customers or away from my customers, and from there we can make some cash.
We've obviously just seen BG Group join forces with Shell. Could this be the shape of things to come? Could we see a lot more monopolies developing?
Well, it's a domino effect in each industry. Once a couple of companies merge or acquire, you tend to see a lot more happening. I would say that the oil and gas market is probably going to go crazy over the next few months, few years even. It's a huge impact on that industry, the BG and the Shell transaction. I would expect a lot more coming from it.
So how do you think regulators are behaving at the moment?
Going back to the Shell and BG Group instance, many would have expected the regulators to let things happen there, but there isn't a lot of liquidity in global markets at the moment, so they're letting things slide a little bit. I suppose their due diligence is what it needs to be at the moment to let that money flow through the system.
What's the most important stages for a merger between two organisations?
So you get two primary stages. So the first stage is before the deal, which is evaluation. So a company will go in and, bean count, I suppose. The problem there is, as that takes time and as they're formulating the deal which is to come, you'll get strategic drift, it's referred as, which is when one company says it's doing this, it's positioned itself in the market in position A, and as the deal moves forward, it moves to position B. So as time goes on, that can be clinical, and the companies will change value, and it could end up in a problem when it comes to signing a deal. After that, you've got the implementation stage. Having a decent project manager in place then, again, absolutely pivotal, primarily because just bringing those synergies together, really, really important. If you don't get that right, you might as well walk away.
So what would you consider to be a well-managed merger?
It's very difficult to frame one merger that's gone very, very well, because I'd be skeptical, quite a lot of them. Many of them have gone wrong. There's been a few great examples, of course, but there's just a few pots in the roll just to avoid. I think identifying synergies and making things happen quickly is really, really important, and as long as you get that going, then you're going to do a good job.
So at what point does a merger typically fall apart, and what can one party or both do about it?
Well, early on, in most mergers, you'll get a lot of people pulling out because they realise that their evaluations haven't done well. It's getting that evaluation done absolutely months in advance, and again, a good project manager will be able to analyse that and work out what's the best way to do that, and here are the good targets. That won't facilitate a great problem. It's later on, that's where the bigger problems happen. When you've got your implementation teams in place, you'll get people from both organisations trying to fuse. It won't always work. Heads have to be cut, and it can be an unpopular choice in the end.
And finally, from a tax or transfer pricing perspective, what's worth noting during a multinational merger?
Well, a lot of these multinational mergers happen primarily because of transfer pricing gains or tax gains, which regulators will keep an eye on. I think it's keeping governments on hand is really, really very important because they will start to sniff around and think, well, what are you doing with these funds? Why aren't we getting a tax off them? So keeping them on board early days is probably a very good idea.